Okay, so at this point you've got your file, it's all been cleaned up, so the line art's nice and good. All the dirt's been removed. You've got your line art on one layer, you've got your trapping layer below that, and at the moment I've just got a plain white background layer underneath that. So the way I would normally begin flatting these kind of pages is I'd make a new layer to begin with just for the character flats. So you click down the bottom there for a new layer. Just going to rename that layer character flats. And then I'm going to put another layer underneath that called backdrop flats. Just going to put that underneath there. There we go. And then what I'll do here, I'll do all the characters on this layer and I'll do all the backdrops on the layer below that. So you can flat in a couple of different ways. You can use the selection tools or you can use the brush and the pencil tools. I wouldn't recommend using the brush tools because it won't give you a very hard edge. You need the pencil tool for that, so I'll go over that in a moment. But I'm just going to start off showing you how you can do some flatting with the selection tools. So luckily the artwork here is fairly clean, so there's no gaps in the line art. If there are any gaps, there's very few of them. So you can use the selection tools on this quite effectively. And the way I would do that is I would zoom in. So let's see what we've got here. Say for example, this top section here with the main character Lou. I can use the selection tools, or at least I can as soon as the spinning wheel of death stops spinning. There we go. I can use the selection tools here, and I could, if I wanted to, just draw around very roughly around the main character here. And because the selection, because the line art is so clean, I could use the magic wand tool to then remove these outside bits. So to do that, you make sure you've got the sample or layers box checked, make sure it's not anti-aliased, and make sure you've got contiguous selected. And then holding down the Alt key to remove selections, you just click in the areas you want removed. We now have a fairly good selection around this guy. Now if I was to put a flat colour in there right now, it would be outside of the black lines, so I do need to bring that selection in somewhat. So we do that just by going to the Select menu, going to Modify, Contract, bring that in by probably 1 or 2 pixels. I usually favour 2. You see it's made the selection slightly smaller. And then I just fill out with a generic colour. I'm just going to grab a sort of a rough kind of skin tone type thing. There we go. And then you can just fill that with a foreground colour. So you just go to the Edit menu, fill it with foreground colour at 100%. And there we go. I can then go to Select, Deselect. So I've got a very basic block colour there for him. Now to section that up into different colours, I can go to the character flat layer here, and then I can click on this icon, which is the Lock Transparent Pixels. So now I can draw anywhere on the page, but it'll only show up where there's already an existing colour. So then I can use either the selection tools, or I can use the brush tool, which I've now selected as a pencil tool. Make sure you put that at 100%. And then you can start picking different colours and using different brush sizes and drawing in the bits that you want to colour or section off. So I know that Lou's face here is different from the rest of him, so I'm going to keep his face to skin colour, and the rest I'm just going to draw around. And then I can use the paint bucket tool. Again, make sure it's not anti-aliased. I can click there to fill that in. Then I can use the different colours, again with the pencil tool. And you can then go ahead and fill in the rest of the details like that. And at this point, it comes down to personal preference. If you want to use the selection tools to select an area and then fill it, you can do that. So there would just be a matter of, using either the freeform tools or the polygon tools. Depending on the artwork, you can get away with the magic wand tool as well. It really does come down to personal preference at this stage. And all you do is just go through each character bit by bit, draw in the basic coloured flats. I'm also using the shift button with the brush tool here, or with the pencil tool I should say, to cover larger areas a bit quicker. As you can see. If you do go outside the lines by mistake, something like that, you could just use the color picker tool and clean up where you've gone over the lines. Don't forget you can zoom in as well if you want to do more precise selections. Usually I find that you shouldn't need to be zoomed in any more than 50% anyway, because depending on the size of the document you're working on, that should be ample to flat things up with. But if you want to be a real stickler and you want to really make sure it's absolutely precisely flatted, then of course you can dive in and really zoom into it. So I'm not going to spend a great deal of time flattening this up here. This is just purely a quick demonstration. You can see how using the combination of the different colors and the pencil tool and the selection tools, you can go and flat up a character reasonably quickly. And of course this will vary depending on how much kind of detail you've got in a piece, or depending on how many characters are on a specific page. That will of course vary hugely from job to job, but the basics of it are pretty much the same. So there we go. So this is a fairly standard kind of quick flattened job here, nothing too crazy. There we go. If I zoom that back out now, that's that first character flatted. So what you have to do at this stage then is you have to go through and basically do the same process for all the characters on the screen here. I tend to colour everything with one flat colour first, so all the characters have at least some colour on them, and then I go through and break up the rest of the details from there. Now I'm not going to flat the entire page because that would be quite boring for you guys to watch. But in order for me to draw on these bits here, you can see there's a lot of gaps in these bits. So the magic wand tool is probably not going to be the best option for that. What you could do, you could unlock the transparent pixels here, so you can now draw again on the transparent bits. And one way of doing this quite quickly and effectively is to kind of block off the areas where you've got gaps. So you can see here, I can see at the top of the helmet there's bits missing there, there's a bit on the shoulder here, there's a bit on the cuff there, a little bit down here on the frame. The background character, Mal, he's got quite a few gaps in him, so we can fill this up, block these in here. So I'm not going to flat the entire character, but I'm just going to fill in just enough of the gaps. So once the gaps are all plugged, you can then go and use the selection tools. So you can then use the polygon tool here, just roughly click around the characters. Again, needn't be super exact, just make sure you've got them covered. There we go, so very rough selection. Back to my magic wand tool, make sure that anti-alias is turned off, make sure contiguous is turned on, and you've got sample all layers. Use the Alt button. As you click, you can then remove these outside gaps. And because we've plugged the gaps earlier with the pencil tool, it's going to make it a lot simpler Same as before, we'll bring the selection in somewhat. So we're going to contract that, bring it in by 2 pixels. And then exactly as last time, we're just going to fill that with the foreground color. You can use the Alt key and the backspace key together to quickly fill that without having to use the paint bucket tool. Now, when I brought those in, it's brought the frame bit here just slightly in too far, so I'm just going to fill in these small areas at the bottom of the frame. And at this stage, you can then lock those transparent pixels, use the pencil tool, pick the colors, and then you can, of course, start the whole process again. Go through and block everything out. So this is the part of the job where it gets quite tedious, because of course you've got a lot of back and forth to do in certain sections here to kind of make it all good. So this is where a little bit of diligence is needed, and a bit of patience. But as long as you beaver away at it, before long you end up with a nicely flatted page. Again, you can see I'm being fairly rough and ready here. I'm not really doing a bang-up job of the flats. That's because I don't want to bore you guys, and also because I'm an inherently lazy person. So this at least gives you a flavour of how you can flat up a page. Like I say, you're not going to get it done super quickly, but there are ways you can kind of make the job a little bit easier for yourself. So I'm just going to leave that there as an example. Backgrounds then, I follow pretty much the same sort of thing. With the backgrounds, make sure you've got your backdrop flat selected. Make sure that you haven't got the transparent icon selected so you can actually draw on these things. And the way I would do this, when you've got like enclosed frames like this, a nice way of quickly flattening in your backgrounds is to grab your selection tool, make sure it's the rectangular tool, make sure you've got no feathering on there, and then just drag a box from the whole page, just like that. Use the magic wand tool, same as before, hold down the Alt key so you're subtracting from selection, put it outside the frames, and then delete. Sorry, and then click, I should say, and then you've now got a selection that goes around the frames. And exactly the same as before, we're going to bring that in by contracting it just slightly. So now you can pick a nice colour, a nice dark colour, or whatever colour you want to use for your backdrops. There we go. Now you see there was a couple of gaps in this particular one here, so that particular frame didn't fill. That's not a problem. In this case, you could just use your marquee selection tool. Because it's a square, you can just flat that in quite quickly that way. Once you've got your backgrounds all in just coloured up like that, same as with the character flats, you can just click on the transparent pixels. So you can only draw on the background bits themselves, and then from this point on, you can then go in and pick other colours and break up those backdrop flats. And again, you can use the selection tools for that. You can use the pencil tools. It's kind of at your discretion from that point on. But you can see here, you can end up flattening in your backdrops quite quickly as well. Of course, if you've got a lot of detail to go in there, then that'll take a bit longer as well. And as I said earlier, if you go over the lines, just select the colour you want to do, and then you can go back and fix up any mess ups there. And as you can see at this point, it's really just a matter of going through and being diligent and filling in everything. You're not going to get it right first time, but obviously there's going to be mistakes along the way. I just realised that this background here should be the same as the panel above. So I'm going to select that colour, make a couple of click points here. There we go. There we are. And doing this way, of course, you can just go through bit by bit and flatten the backdrops as well. It'll take a lot of experimentation, so find out what works best for you. If you like using the brush tools, by all means use the brush tools and the pencil tools. If you like using the selection tools, then by all means use those. I find it's pretty good practice to use a combination of the two. But ultimately, you just got to go with whatever works for you, really. And that's where all the experimentation comes in. The more you practice, the quicker you'll get at flatting, and then you can take on some quite nasty pages, and not feel too daunted. Just feel a little bit daunted, which is good for the soul, so I'm told. There we are. So I've just briefly done that. You can also start applying other effects at this point as well if you wanted to colour the line art. Like for example, this smoke here. I could just pick a darker grey, click on the line art, which we've already prepared. Because the line art is now set to only work on transparent pixels, you could then actually colour that line art a nice grey colour. That just pushes that smoke back a little bit, and just kind of separates it off. You just move the whole thing there. It just separates it off from the screen and pushes it back behind the characters and doesn't make it quite so prominent. This is also a good effect for laser blasts, for fire effects, explosions, and it's also good for glass. So what I could do, I could go into the visors of the characters here, and I could actually grey out or kind of like darken, or sort of rather lighten the lines a little bit, just to give their faces the impression that they're actually behind sort of a glassy screen. You've got to be quite subtle with it. And again, you don't have to worry too much about doing this at the flatting stage, because this is something you can always go back in and do later. But you can see right there, just doing that kind of thing will give it a slightly different kind of feel to it. I'm just going to undo that though. That's just an idea. So yeah, at that stage, you've seen how to flat a character. You've seen how to flat the backdrops. You can use the selection tools, the pencil tools. You can use the lock transparent pixels icon. So that gives you a pretty straightforward idea of how to run a flatting session. It's just time consuming and laborious. So sit back, get a cup of coffee, and get cracking onto it. The next step now will be to shade it up. So when I get the rest of this page flatted, I'll come back and I'll show you guys a bit more about how I do my shading. Again, it's up to you how you want to do it. There's loads of different methods, so my way is not gospel. It's just a way. It doesn't have to be the way. Okay, so thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and I'll catch up with you guys again soon. Bye.